back over here, Nigel Farage's fantasy economics will lead to economic meltdown. At least that's according to Keir Starmer, who's expected to have a speech later on today slamming all of this.
Well, he's also set to accuse Reform UK of gambling with the nation's finances and making the same bet that Liz Truss did.
Well, it follows that fiery speech made by Mr Farage on Tuesday in which he accused the Prime Minister of having no passion and of being terrified of reform.
Well, joining us with more is political commentator Theo Usherwood. Good to see you this morning,
Great
Theo.
to see you both.
And Nigel Farage has got a point, hasn't he, that he's terrified of reform, because we're seeing the Prime Minister make a speech about Nigel Farage today.
2 days after Nigel Farage held that big press conference in central London, Keir Starmer has felt it necessary to come out and give his own speech, in an attempt to try and demolish what Mr Farage set out. And he's going after Nigel Farage's economic policy and what he plans to do, specifically around tax. So Mr Farage set out increasing the personal allowance basically up to £20,000. That costs somewhere, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, between 50 and 80 billion pounds a year. And then, of course, he's also sided with Labour MPs who are very concerned around the welfare cuts, particularly on the winter fuel allowance. Nigel Farage is committed to restoring that. That's 1.5 billion. And then the two-child benefit cap, that amounts to around 3.5 billion. Of course, 7 Labour MPs lost the whip last year when they voted with an SNP amendment on that. Keir Starmer now is understood to be considering to remove the cap, and Nigel Farage said he'll do so. But that all amounts to billions of pounds of taxpayers' money, and that's why Keir Starmer's going after him today by trying to liken him to that Liz Truss mini-budget where we saw inflation go north of 11%, interest rates up to around 6%, and the pain that people up and down the country felt. My one question is that if in 2029 this is the attack line from Labour at the next election, in voters' minds, this is his main gambit from the Prime Minister is going to be something happened with somebody from a different party 7 years ago, and I'm not sure that's going to be enough for to blunt or to spike Nigel Farage's guns.
I mean, the point here is it might be fantasy economics. It doesn't matter at this stage, does it? We're nowhere near a general election. This isn't set down in stone. By the time it comes to producing a manifesto or a pledge or whatever Reform want to call it this time round, things might have changed dramatically. We don't know where the country's going to be.
Yes, that's a very fair point, and we are, still 4 years out from a general election. But I think from Keir Starmer's point of view, he cannot allow Reform to continue to make the progress that they are making. Nigel Farage clearly has his eyes on trying to get up to 35%, 36% in the polls, which would, command, getting into territory where that would command an overall Reform majority in the House of Commons. And there is always a danger, both that if Nigel Farage, if the polls, there was a phrase once used, the polls can be set in aspic. It can become very difficult to shift. And I think the danger for Keir Starmer and for Kemi Badenoch, or whoever takes over from Kemi Badenoch before the next election, which seems inevitable, is that Nigel Farage, he reminds me a little bit of Trump in 2016, where people were like, OK, the Tories had a go, Labour have had a go, I'm no better off. I know the sums might not add up. I know there's this institution called the Institute of Fiscal Studies, and they're saying his sums don't add up. But I'm still no better off. And the Labour haven't done it for me, the Tories haven't done it for me, and there's this guy who's been hopping up and down the sidelines now for 15 years who says that he wants to go. Why don't we give him a try?
Do you think this is the end of left-wing and right-wing politics? Because what we actually saw from Nigel Farage on Tuesday was a little bit of both. We're talking about cutting winter fuel payments for pensioners, reversing that, and ending the two-child benefit cap, and then very right-wing on cultural issues.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. I think that's exactly where it is. I also thought there was a really interesting realignment from Nigel Farage on the family, on younger voters. Traditionally, we've seen the Reform go after older voters. We're thinking about places like where Mr Farage's MP up in Clacton. He didn't commit on the triple lock for pensioners. He said that was a policy that he wanted to think about, which of course cost billions of pounds. And then he said that he obviously wanted to lift the two-child benefit cap, and he recognises that younger voters, and we've seen his popularity amongst the TikTok generation, but we're thinking about people sort of from 25 up to 40. There's there's no policy offering. This is what he's tapping into for them, and that's what Reform are trying to do. It's really ambitious what Nigel Farage is trying to do. Whether he's successful, of course, will be borne out in the polls and in future local elections, and if there's a by-election, and ultimately a general election.
OK, Theo, for now, thanks very much indeed. I tell you what strikes me about it all is the fact that with all the two main political parties, it's all very drudge, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's all very predictable, it's all very slow and sloppy. At least Reform is throwing out stuff which seems exciting and it's very Trump-esque in that way. And that's going to capture people's imaginations. The question is going to be, can they deliver?
Yeah, and I think authenticity cuts through with people as well. I mean, Sir Keir Starmer, like him or loathe him, he can't shake that North London lawyer thing, can he, from him? Whereas, at least with Nigel Farage, people feel as though they know him and they could go for a pint with him.
Yeah, interesting, because I saw an article about that this week and sort of saying it could be fake. It could be faked authenticity that they're saying about people like Farage and Trump. I have to say, the fact we obviously know him a little bit from working here, and he is the sort of person you can just sit down and have a drink with. So I don't think that, in Nigel's case, is faked. But so the big question, you can promise the earth, can you deliver it?
And actually, 4 years is quite a short time in politics, isn't it? So 4 years to get together a shadow cabinet and all your policies, it's not very long.
Let's move on to our poll of the day, should we? We're asking, can any party revive our sluggish economy? We'll bring you the live results throughout the day. Final result later on this afternoon. If you want to take part, gbnews.com/poll. Charlie, can we have a look at what the Prime Minister is going to be saying today? Because he's going to be launching an all-out attack on Reform.
He is accusing the Reform leader, someone that even the Prime Minister describes now as the leader of the opposition, the real leader of the opposition, of articulating fantasy economics. And this is obviously on the back of Nigel Farage's press conference where he said he'd abolish the two-child benefit cap, he'd bring back winter fuel payments in full and pay for that through a whole raft of measures such as cutting the DEI spending, cutting net zero waste, cutting the quangos and everything, and all the waste that's in government departments. I think it's a bit rich, if I might say, coming from the Prime Minister accusing people of fantasy economics, when this is a guy who spent a whole general election campaign saying that they weren't going to raise national insurance contributions on businesses, which they then go and do, that take away the winter fuel payments from pensioners, some of the most vulnerable people in our society, that wasn't in the manifesto, that has choked off growth, choked off the economy, something their central platform message during the general election was growth. We're in an absolute mess as it is with the public finances, with overinflation busting pay rises for the union paymasters that Rachel Reeves was very happy to pose with outside number 11 Downing Street last night. There's no strategy, there's no course direction for this government. Everybody's up in arms. No wonder they're going for reform, and it is just a Prime Minister that's treading water. OK,
now let's have some facts.
Well,
right?
I've given you all the facts.
Hold on. Let's have some facts.
No, they were facts. What have I said?
They weren't.
What have I said?
They were very careful during the general election not to say. They said they wouldn't increase national insurance on employees. They never said it about employers.
They said working people, and working people have paid the price for that.
But they didn't do it. Look. We were left with a disaster to inherit, and we have to find the money. And we have to find the money to both keep Britain going and improve our public services. No. So the thing about the The thing about the pensioners, right, is I don't think it was done well, but I certainly think that there are an awful lot of pensioners. About 2 or 3 million. What are we doing giving rich people rich people money. Of course, it should have been means tested. They just got the means test wrong. I think as far as
if it was just the means test that was wrong and getting people in over.
Look, I've been on here with Nigel Farage and the former editor of The Sun, both, seriously rich people. Of course they shouldn't be getting it. I mean, of course there are pensioners who shouldn't be getting it. But actually, they haven't ruined the economy. But if you looked
at... what's happened to growth? Everything was based on growth.
Growth is going up slowly. Yeah, no, of course. Look, I wouldn't have done it that way, but I don't think it's as bad as Charlie says. And I think it was really, really important that you paid the teachers and you paid the doctors properly.
And now they're coming back for more.
No. The doctors have been told they're not going to get any more.
Yeah, but they are coming back for more. And they're now saying they're going to strike.
But it's not as though they ever went away. I mean, under the Tories, they went on strike.
But that was the point, paying them to stop the strikes. That was the whole message. Yeah, pay the teachers, pay the doctors. They paraded themselves, every television station, every broadcaster say, we've stopped the strikes because we've given these pay rises that the unions say that they needed. Now we're hearing, and patients that are still on those waiting lists will be faced with these headlines today to say that they're faced with even more strikes when they've been paid, the doctors have been paid even more money. This is, so the idea...
So you wouldn't... So hold on, Charlie, so you'd have let the junior doctors stay on strike.
They're doing it, isn't it?
I am asking you a question. You would have let the junior doctors stay on strike. What they did was they gave the junior doctors a fair pay. It wasn't what they wanted. They gave them a fair pay. They came off strike. Waiting lists have gone down as a lot of people... I'm getting...
They're back on strike, though. That's the
problem. And they are being told... And the public... The thing is, it won't happen. It won't happen because they no longer have the public behind them.